News of the situation spread through the Zerathi collective faster than lightspeed communications. Within days, every Zerathi world knew that human younglings were on Zyrax Prime, inside a military complex. The reaction was immediate and intense. Public opinion split into different groups. Some Zerathi were outraged, believing humans had deliberately sent children as some kind of threat or insult. Others thought humans were simply barbaric, training their young for war before they were fully grown. A smaller group wondered if this was a misunderstanding, but they were in the minority. The Zerathi Council of Dominance held emergency sessions every day. Representatives from dozens of worlds argued about what this meant for human-Zerathi relations. Some called for the immediate return of the students. Others wanted to demand explanations and apologies from Earth's government. A few extremists even suggested taking the students as leverage, though these voices were quickly silenced. "We are not kidnappers," Council Leader Vexazara declared firmly. "Whatever the humans intended, those younglings are under our protection now. We will keep them safe until this matter is resolved." On Zyrax Prime, the situation had become almost absurd. The 6 students were confined to their quarters, but it wasn't really confinement. It was more like the galaxy's most intense protective custody. Guards stood outside their door at all times, not to keep them in, but to keep everything else away. When Amy tried to go for a walk, 3 guards immediately surrounded her, scanning the area for threats. When Lucas wanted to visit the training grounds to watch exercises, 5 guards escorted him and kept everyone else at a distance. "This is ridiculous," Jake muttered. He was sitting in the common room with the others, feeling frustrated and confused. "Yesterday we were training with them. Today they treat us like we're made of glass." Sophie was working on her datapad trying to research Zerathi culture. "I think I understand what happened. Look at this. In Zerathi biology, they mature really fast. 8 years old and they're fully grown physically and mentally. They start warrior training immediately. So they think we're like super young?" Chris asked. "Not just young," Sophie said. "To them we're babies playing soldier. Can you imagine how they see us? We're 16 and 17, but to them that's like being 2 years old in Zerathi years." Nina made a face. "That's actually kind of insulting. We've trained for years. We're not helpless." "Try telling them that," Lucas said, pointing at the door. "They won't even let us walk around alone." The worst part was the pity in the Zerathi eyes. When the guards looked at them, it wasn't with respect anymore. It was with concern and protectiveness, the way adults look at small children near a busy street. The students found it humiliating. Sophie managed to access the station's communication array late one night. She sent a coded message back to Earth, to Dr. Helen Price. The message explained what was happening, how they were being treated, and how the Zerathi seemed genuinely terrified something might hurt them. "Tell them we're okay," Sophie wrote. "We're not in danger. But they won't listen to us. They think we're too young to understand our own safety. Please help." Captain Daniel Carter received the message while his ship traveled toward Zyrax Prime. He had brought his full diplomatic team, including Dr. Helen Price and a xenobiologist named Dr. Richard Lane. They spent the journey preparing for what might be the most important negotiation in human history. "We need to understand their perspective," Richard explained during a briefing. "In most fast-maturing species, there's a sharp line between childhood and adulthood. One day you're a child, the next day you're not. They don't have the concept of adolescence that humans have." Maya Torres, who had also come along, shook her head. "But our students aren't babies. They're trained. They're capable. How do we make the Zerathi see that?" "We might not be able to," Daniel said quietly. "We might have to accept that in Zerathi eyes, anyone under 18 is a child, period. The question is how we move forward from there." When the Horizon arrived at Zyrax Prime, Thexral was waiting at the spaceport personally. He looked exhausted. His scales, normally shining, seemed dull. When Daniel and his team disembarked, Thexral greeted them formally but with obvious stress. "Captain Carter, thank you for coming quickly. We must resolve this situation before it escalates further." "Agreed," Daniel said. "But first, I'd like to see the students. I need to confirm they're being treated well." Something like offense flashed in Thexral's eyes. "Did you think we would harm them?" "They are younglings. We have protected them with every resource at our disposal." "I meant no insult," Daniel said carefully. "I know you've kept them safe, but they're probably confused and scared. I should speak with them." Thexral led them to the guest barracks. The number of guards had increased since the crisis began. There were now at least 20 Zirathi warriors surrounding the building, all armed and alert. Inside, the 6 students jumped up when they saw Captain Carter. Jake spoke first. "Sir, we didn't mean to cause trouble. We didn't know they would react like this." "I know," Daniel said gently. "This isn't your fault. It's a misunderstanding between our cultures." He looked at all of them carefully. They seemed healthy and unharmed, just frustrated and confused. "How have they been treating you?" "Like we're 3 years old," Chris said bluntly. "They won't let us do anything. We asked to watch a training exercise yesterday and they acted like we wanted to jump into a volcano." "They're scared," Sophie added. "Really scared. Not of us, but for us. I think they genuinely believe we could get hurt from anything." Daniel nodded slowly. This was what he had feared. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have a meeting with the Zirathi Council. We need to explain human development and culture to them. It's not going to be easy. Can we help?" Lucas asked. "We could explain what it's like being our age, what we're capable of." "Actually, that's a good idea," Richard Lane said. "Personal testimony might be more effective than biological data." The meeting was scheduled for the next day. It would be held in the council chamber, the most important political location on Zyrax Prime. The entire Zirathi Council would attend, along with War Prime Thexrel and his senior officers. That night, the students prepared what they would say. Jake volunteered to speak for all of them. He wrote notes, practiced his words, and tried to find the right way to explain human adolescence to aliens who had never experienced it. When morning came, they were escorted to the council chamber by no fewer than 30 guards. The building was enormous, carved from red stone and decorated with symbols of Zirathi military victories. Inside, the chamber itself was circular, with seats rising in tiers around a central speaking floor. The Zirathi council members were impressive and intimidating. They were all older Zirathi, their scales darker with age, their bodies marked with countless scars. These were leaders who had fought in wars, commanded fleets, and shaped the destiny of their civilization. Council leader Vexa Zara sat highest, looking down at the humans with eyes that had seen centuries pass. Dr. Richard Lane spoke first. He gave a presentation on human biological development, explaining how humans had evolved with a long childhood period. He showed charts comparing human growth rates to Zirathi and other species. He explained about human brain development, how certain cognitive abilities didn't fully mature until the early 20s. The Zirathi listened, but Daniel could see they weren't really convinced. Facts and data didn't change how they felt about children. Then it was Jake's turn to speak. He walked to the center of the floor, looking up at the tiers of powerful aliens. He was nervous, but he didn't let it show. "Council leader, honored members, War Prime Thexrel," he began. "I want to tell you what it means to be a human teenager." He talked about growing up, about the journey from childhood to adulthood that took years for humans. He explained how teenagers had the physical abilities of adults, but were still learning emotional control and wisdom. He described the academy, how it prepared students not by throwing them into danger but by gradually building their skills and judgment. "We're not children anymore," Jake said. "But we're not fully adults yet either. We're in between, and that's okay. That's normal for humans. We learn by doing, by challenging ourselves, by sometimes failing and trying again." He paused, making eye contact with Thexrel. "You watched us in training simulations before you knew our ages. You said we fought well. You called us warriors. Nothing about us has changed since then. We're the same people we were a week ago. The only difference is now you know our ages." Vexa Zara leaned forward. "But you admit you are not fully mature? How can we risk your safety when you are still developing?" "Because being safe isn't the same as being protected from everything," Jake replied. "Humans need challenges to grow. If you keep us completely safe from all risks, we never learn how to handle difficult situations. We need to make mistakes while we're young so we don't make bigger mistakes when we're older." There was silence in the chamber. The Zirathi were thinking about this, considering it. Then Thexrel stood. "The youngling speaks with courage, but courage does not change biology. By your own words, you are still developing, still learning. This makes you vulnerable. How can we, in good conscience, allow vulnerable younglings near military training?" The planet Zyrax Prime was beautiful in a harsh way. Red deserts stretched beneath purple skies, and the cities were built like fortresses. Everything about the Zirathi homeworld spoke of strength and survival. When the shuttle landed at the main military complex, Jake and the others pressed against the windows, trying to see everything at once. "It looks like something from an adventure game," Lucas whispered. "That's a real military installation," Amy corrected. "Look at those weapon emplacements. They could probably shoot down anything that gets close." Thexrel led them off the shuttle. The air was warm and dry, smelling of minerals and something spicy that the humans couldn't identify. Zerathi warriors were everywhere, training in combat squares, maintaining weapons, running in formation. They all stopped to stare at the humans. "You will stay in the guest barracks," Thexrel explained, leading them to a long building. "It has been modified for your needs. Gravity, atmosphere, temperature, all adjusted to human comfort." The quarters were actually quite nice. Each student had their own room, and there was a common area where they could gather. The furniture was sized for Zerathi, which made everything slightly too large, but it was manageable. "Tomorrow your training begins," Thexrel said. "You will observe our methods and participate where appropriate. Tonight rest. Adjust to the time cycle here." That first week was exciting. The students watched Zerathi combat drills, sat in on strategy sessions, and learned about Zerathi military history. The Zerathi warriors were curious about them too, asking questions about human fighting styles and earth weapons. But Thexrel started noticing things that bothered him. The humans were smaller than he expected. He had thought they were just a compact species, but now he wondered. They also tired more easily than Zerathi. During a long training session, Nina had to sit down and rest. She apologized, saying she wasn't used to the heat yet. Then there were the questions they asked. Simple things that any warrior should know. When a Zerathi instructor demonstrated weapon maintenance, Sophie asked very basic questions about how the energy cells worked. Lucas didn't understand certain tactical terms that were common knowledge among Zerathi fighters. Thexrel told himself this was just cultural difference. Human warriors were trained differently. That had to be the explanation. On the 8th day, something happened that changed everything. It was Jake's birthday. The other humans had somehow managed to make a small celebration in their common room. They sang a human song and gave him small gifts they had brought from Earth. Thexrel stopped by to see what the commotion was about. "Today is a special day," Chris explained. "It's Jake's birthday. He's 17 now." 17, Thexrel repeated slowly. "This is significant?" "Well, yeah," Jake said, grinning. "One more year and I'll be 18. Then I can actually enlist for real military service. Right now I'm just in the academy, preparing." The room went very quiet. Thexrel stared at Jake. 18, he said softly. "You cannot serve in your military until you are 18 solar cycles old?" "Right," Jake confirmed, not understanding why the war prime suddenly looked strange. "That's the legal minimum age for military service on Earth. You can join the academy at 15, but you can't officially enlist until 18. How old are you all?" Thexrel demanded. His voice had changed. It was harder now, almost frightened. The students looked at each other, confused by his reaction. "I'm 16, Sophie said hesitantly. 17, said Lucas. 16, Amy added. 16, Nina and Chris said together. Thexrel took a step backward. His tail, which usually stayed still, was lashing back and forth. That was a sign of distress in Zerathi body language. "You are children," he whispered. "You are all children." "What?" "No," Jake protested. "We're teenagers. We're almost adults." "Almost is not the same as being," Thexrel said. His voice was shaking now. "In my culture, anyone not fully mature is a child. A youngling. Sacred and protected above all else." He turned and left quickly. The students heard him shouting in the hallway outside, his voice mixing Zerathi and human languages. "What just happened?" Nina asked. "I think we messed up," Sophie said quietly. "I think we messed up really badly." Within an hour, everything changed. Zerathi warriors arrived at their quarters, but not in a threatening way. They were careful, almost gentle. They asked the humans to please stay in their rooms for now. Guards were posted outside, but the guards kept looking at the students with what seemed like worry. Jake tried to leave to find Thexrel, to explain that they were fine, that this was normal for humans. The guards stopped him, but they did it carefully as if afraid of hurting him. "Please, young one guard said in broken English. "For your safety."
"Stay inside."
"War Prime is dealing with emergency." "Emergency? What emergency?" Jake demanded. The guard wouldn't answer. In the command center of the military complex, Thexral was having what could only be described as a panic attack. He had contacted the Zerathi High Council immediately. Now their faces glowed on communication screens around him, and they were all speaking at once. "You brought human children to a military installation? This is unprecedented. What were the humans thinking? This could be a trap, a test of some kind." "Everyone be silent," commanded Council Leader Vexasara, the oldest and most respected Zerathi alive. War Prime Thexral explained clearly. "How did this happen?" Thexral explained everything. The exchange program. The academy. How he had watched these humans perform tactical exercises and assumed they were warriors. How no one had ever clearly stated their ages. "They look like warriors," he said desperately. "They act like warriors. How was I to know humans take so long to mature? In our species, 8 cycles is full adulthood. How can it take humans 18 cycles? Different species develop differently," Vexasara said, but even she sounded shaken. "The question now is what we do about it. We have 6 human younglings on Zyrax Prime, in a military complex. If anything happens to them..." She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. The harm of a child was the greatest crime in Zerathi culture. It didn't matter if the children were human or Zyrathi. They were children. If even one of them was injured while in Zyrathi care, it would be a stain on their honor that could never be washed away. "I am contacting the humans now," Thexral said. "I will speak to Captain Carter, demand to know why they sent children." "Do it," Vexasara ordered. "And War Prime? Keep those younglings safe, whatever it takes. Every Zerathi warrior on that base is personally responsible for their well-being. Make that clear." Thexral sent the communication request immediately. It took several minutes to connect across the distance of space. When Captain Daniel Carter's face appeared on the screen, Thexral didn't waste time with greetings. "Captain Carter, you sent us children," he said bluntly. "The students at your academy, the ones I selected for exchange. They are children, not adults. Not warriors, children." Daniel looked confused. "War Prime, they're 16 and 17 years old. They're teenagers preparing for adult service. Yes, they're young, but they're hardly children." "They are not fully mature," Thexral insisted. "By your own admission, they cannot serve in your military for another year or more. That makes them younglings, children. And I have brought them to a military world." He could see understanding starting to dawn on Daniel's face. "Oh no," the human captain said softly. "Thexral, in our culture, the line between child and adult isn't sharp. It's gradual. Teenagers are in between. They're mature enough to train and learn, but we protect them until they're fully ready." "There is no in-between," Thexral said flatly. "There is child and there is adult. Nothing else. And I have 6 human children on Zyrax Prime. If anything happens to them while in my care, it will mean war. Not because you will want war, but because my people will demand it. The safety of children is absolute in Zerathi culture." Daniel Carter closed his eyes. "We need to talk about this. I'm coming to Zyrax Prime immediately. We need to resolve this before it becomes a crisis." "It is already a crisis," Thexral replied. "But yes, come quickly." "And Captain, explain to me how your species can be so careless with their young. How can you send them to military academies? How can you let them near combat training?" "That's going to take time to explain," Daniel said. "But I promise you, those students are in no danger. They've trained for situations much more challenging than this." "They are children," Thexral repeated. "They should not have to face challenging situations at all." The communication ended. Thexral sat down heavily in his command chair. Around him, his officers waited for orders. "Double the guards around the human quarters," he finally said. "No training exercises. No physical challenges. They stay safe and comfortable until this is resolved. Is that understood?" "Yes, War Prime," they all replied. In their quarters, the 6 human students had no idea their presence had just created an interstellar incident. They only knew something had gone very wrong, and they were now being treated like fragile glass by aliens who had seemed to respect them as warriors just hours before. "I want to go home," Nina said quietly. For the first time since arriving on Zyrax Prime, the others agreed with her. The Zerathi shuttle was different from any human spacecraft. It looked deadly even when sitting still, all sharp angles and dark metal. War Prime Thexral emerged from it wearing less formal armor than before, though he still looked like he could tear through a steel wall without much effort. Dr. Helen Price waited at the docking port of Armstrong 3, Earth's largest orbital station. She was a specialist in xenodiplomacy, which meant her job was to help different species understand each other. Today she felt the weight of that responsibility more than ever. War Prime Thexral, she said with a respectful bow. Welcome to Earth's orbit. We're honored to host you. Thexral looked around the docking bay with sharp eyes, taking in everything. Human workers moved cargo, security personnel stood at attention, and maintenance crews worked on ships. Your station is efficient, he observed. Military precision, but used for civilian purposes as well. Interesting. We believe in being prepared, Helen replied. But yes, we don't separate military and civilian life as sharply as some species do. May I show you around? Over the next 3 days, Helen took Thexral on a tour of human facilities. They visited the lunar base, saw manufacturing centers on Mars, and observed training exercises at various military installations. Thexral asked many questions, always sharp and intelligent. He seemed particularly interested in how humans trained their fighters. Your warriors are creative, he noted after watching a tactical simulation. They don't follow rigid patterns. Each squad adapts differently to the same problem. We encourage independent thinking, Helen explained. Every human soldier is trained to lead if necessary. Chaos waiting to happen, Thexral said, but there was something like approval in his voice. Yet somehow you make it work. Your species is strange, Dr. Price. On the 4th day, Helen made a decision. She wanted to show Thexral something different, something that might impress him. She took him to the Terran Defense Academy on Armstrong 3. The academy trained young people who wanted to join the military. Students came here at 15 or 16 to prepare for service. They would begin at 18. They learned strategy, combat skills, leadership, and technology. It was considered a great honor to be accepted. When they arrived, a training session was in progress. Helen and Thexral stood in an observation room above a large simulation chamber. Below them, 6 teenagers in training uniforms worked through a complex tactical scenario. They moved through a virtual hostile environment, communicating with hand signals and short words. Leading them was Jake Morrison, a 16-year-old with short brown hair and sharp eyes that constantly scanned his surroundings. He made quick decisions, adapting his squad's formation as new threats appeared in the simulation. When one team member was marked as injured by the system, Jake immediately reorganized the others to cover the gap. Excellent instincts, Thexral murmured, watching closely. That one, the leader. How many seasons has he served? Helen was confused by the question. Seasons? Oh, you mean years? Jake's been here for about 18 months. Before that, where did he fight? He hasn't fought anywhere, Helen said. He's a student, he's training for future service. Thexral looked at her. But he is a warrior. I see it in how he moves, how he commands. His squad trusts him completely. Helen started to explain, but then she saw an opportunity. Would you like to meet them? I think they would be fascinated to meet a Zerathi war prime. After the simulation ended, Helen brought the students to a meeting room. There were 6 of them: Jake Morrison, Sophie Chen, Lucas Grant, Amy Rivera, Chris Bailey, and Nina Walsh. They were excited and nervous. Meeting an alien was still rare for most humans, and meeting a famous warrior like Thexral was extraordinary. Jake stepped forward first. War Prime Thexral, it's an honor, sir. He gave a military salute. Thexral returned the gesture in his own way, putting his fist to his chest. You fight well, young warrior. Your tactics in the simulation showed excellent adaptability. Thank you, sir, Jake said, grinning widely. We've studied reports of Zerathi military operations. Your people's coordination in large-scale battles is amazing. For the next hour, Thexral talked with the students. He asked about their training, their goals, their understanding of warfare. The teenagers asked him about Zerathi culture and military philosophy. Sophie was particularly interested in Zerathi technology. Lucas wanted to know about their honor codes. Amy asked about how Zerathi squads formed bonds. Thexral found himself impressed. These young warriors were intelligent and dedicated. They asked good questions and showed real understanding of military principles. In Zirathi terms, they would be considered promising fighters. When the meeting ended, Thexral spoke privately with Helen. These warriors would be excellent candidates for the exchange program. They are young, adaptable, and eager to learn. They would benefit from seeing how Zirathi train and fight. My own young warriors would learn much from them as well. Helen blinked in surprise. She had hoped to impress Thexral with the academy, but she hadn't expected this. Still, maybe it was a good idea. The students were mature enough to handle an alien environment, and it would be an incredible educational opportunity. I'd need to get permission from their families and the academy administration, Helen said slowly. But if everyone agrees, I think it could work. Excellent, Thexral said with satisfaction. I will prepare accommodations on my homeworld. We will treat them as honored guests and rising warriors. 2 weeks later, everything was arranged. The 6 students had permission from their families. The academy administration thought it was a fantastic opportunity. News media covered it extensively, calling it a historic moment for human-alien relations. Jake stood with the others at the shuttle dock, carrying a small bag of personal items. His parents had been nervous but proud. His little sister had made him promise to record everything to show her when he got back. 3 months on an alien world, Chris said, shaking his head in amazement. This is going to be incredible. Remember, we're representing all of humanity, Sophie reminded them. We need to make a good impression. No pressure, Nina joked, but her eyes were serious. The Zirathi shuttle was waiting. It looked even more intimidating up close. Thexral stood at the entrance, along with several Zirathi warriors who would serve as guides and guards during the exchange. Are you ready, young warriors? Thexral asked. Yes, sir, Jake replied for all of them. Ready and honored to be chosen. They boarded the shuttle and the door sealed behind them. Through the windows, they watched Armstrong 3 station fall away as the shuttle accelerated. Earth was a blue and white marble in the distance, then a dot, then gone as they jumped to faster than light speed. None of them knew what was about to happen. None of them understood the terrible misunderstanding that was already in motion. In Zirathi biology, individuals reached full maturity at 8 solar cycles and began their warrior training immediately. Thexral had assumed these humans were young adults, perhaps in their early 20s by human standards. He had no idea that, by human standards, he had just taken 6 children onto a military vessel bound for a warrior society. The truth would come out soon, and when it did, it would shake the foundations of the fragile new alliance between their species. But for now, the 6 teenagers were simply excited, staring out at alien stars and dreaming of adventure. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewing port of the Terran diplomatic vessel Horizon. Captain Daniel Carter stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the massive space station grow larger as his ship approached. Kepler 7 was a neutral meeting ground, built by several alien species who wanted a place where different civilizations could talk without fighting. Today would make history. The humans were about to meet the Zirathi collective for the first time. Lieutenant Maya Torres walked up beside her captain, holding a data pad. She was nervous, though she tried not to show it. The Zirathi had a reputation across the galaxy. They were warriors, fierce and powerful. Their empire stretched across dozens of star systems, and they had never lost a major war. The Zirathi commander's ship just docked on the other side of the station, Maya said. They're ready when we are. Daniel nodded slowly. He had prepared for this meeting for months. Humanity was still new to the galactic community. Only 50 years ago, humans had discovered faster-than-light travel. Since then, they had spread across space quickly, claiming uninhabited worlds and building colonies. Some of the older alien races were worried. They thought humans were expanding too fast, taking up too much space. The Zirathi were among the most concerned. Several human colonies had been established near Zirathi territory. There had been no conflicts yet, but tensions were rising. That was why this meeting mattered so much. Tell Commander Blake to prepare the shuttle, Daniel said. Let's not keep them waiting. 20 minutes later, Daniel, Maya, and Commander Peter Blake stepped off their shuttle and into Kepler 7 station. The station was enormous inside, with high ceilings and wide corridors. Aliens of different species walked past them, some humanoid, others completely different. Daniel saw a being that looked like a floating jellyfish drift by, and another that resembled a walking tree. A station attendant, a small gray alien with large eyes, guided them to Conference Room 7. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The Zirathi were already waiting inside. Daniel had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was different. The Zirathi looked like reptiles that had evolved to walk upright. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with scales that shimmered in shades of green and gold. Their eyes were sharp and intelligent, with vertical pupils like a snake. They wore armor that looked both ceremonial and functional, decorated with symbols that Daniel guessed represented military achievements. The largest Zirathi stood at the head of the table. This had to be War Prime Thexerol, their supreme military commander. His scales were darker than the others, almost black with streaks of deep purple. Scars crossed his snout and neck, evidence of many battles. "Captain Carter," Thexerol said. His voice was deep and rumbling, but his English was perfect. "Welcome. I am War Prime Thexerol of the Zirathi Collective." "Thank you for meeting with us," Daniel replied, bowing slightly. He had learned that Zirathi respected formal gestures. "This is Lieutenant Maya Torres and Commander Peter Blake." They all sat down at the long table. For a moment, nobody spoke. The tension in the room was thick. Thexerol broke the silence. "Your species expands quickly, Captain. Too quickly, some would say. You claim worlds near our borders. This concerns my people." Daniel had expected this. "We only settle on uninhabited planets. We have no desire for conflict with the Zirathi Collective or any other civilization." "Words are easy," Thexerol replied. "Actions reveal truth. Your ships are heavily armed. Your colonies have military installations. These are not the actions of a peaceful species." Peter leaned forward. "With respect, War Prime, we arm ourselves for defense, not conquest. Humanity has learned hard lessons in our history. We protect what is ours." Thexerol's eyes narrowed, studying Peter. Then, surprisingly, he made a sound that might have been laughter. "I respect honesty. Yes, a species that does not defend itself is a species that will not survive." He paused. "Perhaps humans are not so different from Zirathi." The mood in the room shifted slightly. Maya sensed an opening. "War Prime, our species may have different cultures, but we share common ground. We both value strength and survival. Maybe we can learn from each other instead of viewing each other as threats." Thexerol tilted his head, considering this. "An interesting thought, Lieutenant. But how does one learn without trust? And how does one build trust between species that have never truly known each other?" Daniel saw his chance. "A cultural exchange program. We send some of our people to live among yours for a time. You send some of yours to live among us. Not as spies or soldiers, but as students. We learn your ways. You learn ours." The other Zirathi at the table looked at each other. They communicated, in their own language. A series of hisses and clicks that the translation devices couldn't interpret. Thexerol was silent for a long moment, his clawed fingers tapping slowly on the table. "Your proposal has merit," he finally said. "But it also has risks. What if your people offend our customs? What if mine offend yours? Small misunderstandings can become large conflicts. That's exactly why we need to do this," Maya said. "Better to have misunderstandings during an exchange program than during a military standoff." Thexerol's mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth. Daniel realized the Zirathi was smiling. "You speak with wisdom, young warrior. Very well. I accept this proposal. But I choose who goes where. I will visit your homeworld myself to select appropriate candidates for exchange. You may do the same on ours." "Agreed," Daniel said, standing and offering his hand. It was a human gesture, but one that many species had come to understand. Thexerol looked at the offered hand, then reached out with his own clawed hand and gripped it firmly. His grip was strong, but controlled. "We have an agreement, Captain Carter. Perhaps this will be the beginning of something valuable for both our peoples." As they left the conference room an hour later, Peter pulled Daniel aside. "Do you really think this will work? The Zirathi are warriors. Their whole culture is built around combat and hierarchy. Our cultures are so different." Daniel watched the Zirathi delegation walking away down the corridor. "That's exactly why it has to work, Peter. If we can't find common ground with them, we won't survive in this galaxy. There are thousands of species out here, and we're still the newcomers." Maya joined them. "When does Thexral want to visit Earth?" "He said within 2 weeks," Daniel replied. "We better prepare a good impression." None of them knew that their carefully planned exchange program was about to cause an interstellar incident that would change everything between their two species. The seeds of a massive misunderstanding had just been planted, and they would grow faster than anyone could imagine. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment after the students finished speaking. Council leader Vexisara studied the 6 young humans standing before her. She was old enough to have met dozens of alien species, but humans continued to surprise her. "Sit," she finally said. "All of you. This conversation will take time." Over the next several hours, Dr. Richard Lane presented a more detailed explanation of human development. He showed brain scans, explaining how human prefrontal cortex development continued into the mid-20s. He displayed data on human adolescent psychology, showing the balance between risk-taking and learning. "Humans evolved to have an extended learning period," Richard explained. "Our children stay dependent on adults for years, much longer than most species. But this long childhood comes with advantages. It allows for complex learning, cultural transmission, and adaptability." "It sounds inefficient," commented one council member, a battle-scarred Zirathi named Crixtal. "Your young are vulnerable for so long. How did your species survive?" "Community," Maya Torres answered. "We protect our young together. Families, tribes, societies. Everyone helps raise the next generation. Our long childhood means we can teach complicated ideas, not just instincts." Thexral, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "But you train them for war. You have military academies for these teenagers. How is this protecting them?" "We're preparing them," Captain Daniel Carter said. "Not using them. There's a difference. The students train in safety, with supervision, with the ability to stop if something goes wrong. They're not sent into real combat. When they turn 18 and choose to enlist, they're ready because they've had time to prepare." "And what if they choose not to enlist?" Vexisara asked. "What if, after all this training, they decide not to become warriors?" Jake answered. "Then we don't. The academy teaches us discipline and skills, but it doesn't force us into military service. About half of academy graduates don't join the military. They use what they learned in other jobs. Leadership, teamwork, problem-solving, those skills work anywhere." This concept seemed to genuinely surprise the Zirathi. In their culture, warrior training led to warrior service. There was no other path. "You give them choice?" Crixtal asked. "Even after investing years in their training?" "Especially then," Daniel said. "Forcing someone into a life they don't want creates poor soldiers and unhappy citizens. We want people who choose to serve because they believe in it." The discussion continued. The Zirathi asked many questions about human families, education systems, and the transition from childhood to adulthood. They seemed particularly fascinated by the concept of human parents remaining protective of their children, even after they were physically grown. "My mother still worries about me," Sophie admitted with a small smile. "I'm 16 and training to be a soldier, but she still reminds me to eat healthy and get enough sleep. I think she'll worry about me when I'm 30. Several Zirathi made sounds that might have been understanding. Apparently, parental protectiveness was universal. As the conversation progressed, something shifted in the chamber. The Zirathi were beginning to understand. Human adolescence wasn't weakness. It was a different stage of development, suited to a species that lived longer and learned differently than Zirathi. Finally, Lucas asked if he could speak again. Vexisara nodded permission. "Council leader, I want to say something about how you've treated us this past week," Lucas began. You've been protecting us, and I know it comes from a good place. In your culture, protecting children is the highest priority. I respect that. It's actually beautiful. Several Zirathi straightened at this, not expecting praise. But being protected from everything isn't what we need. Lucas continued. We came here to learn about your culture, to experience something new, to challenge ourselves. When you lock us away and won't let us do anything, you're not protecting us. You're preventing us from growing. What if something happened to you? Thexrel asked. The War Prime's voice was quieter now, less commanding. What if, under my watch, one of you was injured or worse? How could I face your parents? How could I face myself? With respect, War Prime, Amy said. Stuff happens. We might get injured. That's part of learning. My brother broke his arm during academy training. It healed. He learned to be more careful on rope climbs. If we're so protected that we never face any risk, we never learn how to handle risks. Your species is strange, Krixtal said, but there was something like respect in his voice now. You raise your young slowly, carefully, yet you also challenge them. You protect them, but also let them face danger. How do you balance these opposites? It's hard, Daniel admitted. Every human parent struggles with it. When do you let your child try something risky? When do you step in? There's no perfect answer. We make our best guesses and hope we're preparing them for life. Vexazera was silent for a long time. The other council members waited for her judgment. She was the eldest and most respected. Whatever she decided would shape policy. I begin to understand, she said slowly. Your species takes many years to mature because you have many things to learn. Your long childhood allows for deep learning. Your adolescence is a bridge, a time when your young practice being adults while still having protection if they fail. Yes, Richard said. Exactly. But this creates a challenge for us, Vexazera continued. In our culture, a child is sacred, protected absolutely. But you are telling us these adolescents are not quite children and not quite adults. They need both protection and challenge. How can we provide both? Maybe we find a compromise, Sophie suggested. We stay for the exchange program like planned, but instead of military training, we learn about other parts of Zirathi culture, history, philosophy, civilian life, things that are educational but don't make you worry about our safety. And in return, Daniel added, we'll send some of our younger Zirathi exchange students to Earth, those who recently reached maturity in your terms. They can experience how humans handle the transition from youth to adulthood. Maybe both our species can learn something. Thexeral looked at the council leader, then at the students. Something had changed in his expression. The panic was gone, replaced by thoughtful consideration. These younglings, these adolescents, he said, testing the word. They have courage. When they stood before this council, they did not hide behind their captain. They spoke for themselves. They showed pride without arrogance. These are qualities we value in Zirathi regardless of age. They also have wisdom beyond their years, Vexazera agreed. To admit they are still learning, while also asserting their capabilities. That is a difficult balance. The council debated for another hour before reaching a decision. The students would remain on Zyrax Prime for their exchange period, but the program would be modified. They would study Zirathi culture, language, history, and civilian technology. They would observe military training but not participate in ways that the Zirathi considered too risky for younglings. In exchange, 3 young Zirathi who had recently reached maturity would visit Earth. They would live with human families, attend human schools, and experience the long human transition to adulthood. This will be an experiment, Vexazera declared. Both our species will learn from it. Perhaps we will discover that there are many ways to raise the next generation. The students were allowed to return to normal interactions, though the Zirathi still treated them with extra care. It was a compromise everyone could live with. 6 months passed. The exchange program became a success story. The human students learned the Zirathi language fluently and could discuss military philosophy with adult warriors. They wrote detailed, reports about Zerathi culture that became required reading at the academy. Jake even helped design new tactical training programs based on Zerathi methods. Meanwhile, the three young Zerathi on Earth experienced culture shock but adapted. They were amazed by human families, by the long conversations between parents and adolescents, by the way humans learned gradually over many years. One of them wrote that humans grow wisdom like trees, slowly and with deep roots. Thexrel visited Earth twice more during that period. The second time, Dr. Helen Price arranged for him to visit an ordinary human family, not a military installation. He had dinner with the Rodriguez family in California. The parents had 3 children, a 20-year-old in college, a 16-year-old in high school, and a 12-year-old in middle school. Watching them interact, seeing how the parents guided but didn't control, how the children challenged but still respected their parents, Thexrel finally understood. Human families were teaching their young how to think, not just what to think. It took longer, but it created adults who could adapt to anything. "Your species is still strange to me," Thexrel admitted to Captain Carter as they stood on the observation deck of Armstrong 3 station, watching Earth rotate below. "But I begin to see the method in what seemed like madness." "And you still make us nervous," Daniel replied with a slight smile. "A species that matures in 8 years and immediately becomes warriors. It's efficient and focused. But I see the value in it now too." "We protect our young by making them strong quickly," Thexrel said. "You protect yours by teaching them slowly, giving them time to learn from mistakes in safety before facing real danger." Different solutions to the same problem.